This is part 3 of a session that I'm doing on understanding online job boards, particularly for physicians and advanced practitioners. Each of these is meant to stand on its own. The first one was about who actually wrote the job, the ownership of the position. The second was about the language. When you read through these job descriptions, what do these terms mean? What should you be looking for? And this wraps everything up. We're going to look at red flags, things that we should be concerned about. We'll look at some green flags, reverse engineering your job search, and how to run through a series of questions at the end. So with red flags, now these are things that are generally concerning, but are not 100% outright problematic. And this first example is a good indication of that. When you see a job that keeps showing up, it's reposting, generally that's a problem. Like in the world of real estate, when a house is consistently on the market and shows over and over again and people are looking, people back off. Start to think, oh, well, something's wrong with that. That's not a good place, that there's a problem. The same is true with job descriptions. When you see a job continuing to show up, there can be some concerns that arise. Generally, that's true. That means that there's a problem, especially if it's a generally desirable area. An evergreen job posting is either a retention problem, they can't keep people, a culture problem, or a problem with leadership that no candidate can ever really satisfy. Not 100% the case all times. I talked before about some positions that I've had, like in the Villages, Florida, where it's a massively growing community, and I placed primary care doctor. We started a search. We filled it quickly within just a few weeks, actually. And then they opened up another one because the need was so great. Filled that one. They opened up a few more down the road. So it appeared as if I didn't write new job descriptions. It was the same job. And so when I talked to some doctors, they'd say, oh, I've seen this up before. This is one of those jobs you can't fill. No, actually, look, here's a website. Look at the start dates of these doctors. I placed them. And so not always, but you want to be aware of that. If you see multiple ranges on compensation for the same job on different job postings. One, a third-party company is not going to represent a job without some kind of contractual relationship with a client who owns it. There's no point. It's a waste of time and money. No one's going to do that. So that means that there's some kind of communication going on. But if you have the same job and they're all over the place, that means that there's an extremely poor amount of communication, which can be an internal client problem, or they're so desperate, they're just throwing spaghetti against the wall to hopefully find someone to respond to one of these postings where they can try to bring them in. Be cautious of that. This one specifically is more broad overall, but it's the name of the employer. You want to know the name of the employer before you submit your CV and move forward. There are no ifs, ands, and buts about this, except the hyper rare case where you have an extremely great relationship with a recruiter. I had this with a few doctors. Something would come up. They would trust me. I would say, hey, I think this is a great opportunity. Can I submit your CV and get you going before the flood of candidates come in there? And they trusted me. So they said, yeah, absolutely. And then they weren't committed to it. Sometimes they would take it. Sometimes they wouldn't. If it worked out, if it did, it didn't. That's hyper rare. Unless you have that relationship with a recruiter, never move forward for purposes we talked about. You don't want to be kept out of a job. This could cause problems with the potential employer. So don't move forward unless you know who the employer is. You're not always going to see it on a job description. If it's a third-party agency, they're paid to do the work independently. So they're generally not going to give the employer, one, it's bad business model. The company's shut down. They can't make money if everyone goes around them. Two, a lot of times there's exclusive contracts where the hospital practice specialty group will work with the company to have them do that work. Four is urgency without specifics. If someone is trying to push you to make a decision, look, in any aspect of life, this is how scammers work. Someone is trying to push you with pressure to make a decision, back off. The more pressure, the more you back off. They're interviewing this week. I need to get you in real quick. Be careful with that kind of language. That is not your responsibility. That's not your fault. Again, if you know the recruiter, if you trust the situation. But generally, high-pressure tactics are a red flag. Compensation described purely in adjectives. Extremely lucrative, top of the market, highly competitive. When you hear these terms, you want to be very cautious with this. There are state laws out there, and I listed these in part 2 of this. I'm happy to do so again if you're interested, reach out. But you can look these up online. There are state compensation transparency laws that affect all specialties, healthcare included. California is the most stringent that I'm aware of. They have to post the salary range out there. So you're not always going to get it. It depends on the state, but you are allowed to request that in the vast majority of cases. And even if a state doesn't permit that, do it anyways. This is a big one. When I was a recruiter, I would focus on the client side with this question and the candidate side. What is your motivation? If you're a candidate looking, I want to find out, why are you looking? Why are you leaving your practice? If it's a client, what's the reason for the search? Are we replacing someone? Are we having growth? or a problem, something going on. You want to find out what that reason is. It's not always going to be stated. A good job description is going to have it. When the lifestyle description exceeds the clinical description. Look, when you're working with a direct employer, a lot of the times these jobs are highly sanitized by legal and HR. They're only going to address the bare minimum, which usually clinical expectations and a lot of requirements of candidates. I would always push back on this and say, you've got to explain why someone would want to live here. They're not going to spend 24/7 in your clinic, your hospital, and the family won't either. What's in the community? Sell it, promote it, go to a marketer, go to a realtor's website, get some information. I would always work with a realtor to try to find out what's good and bad about this community. What do I need to be aware of? What do I need to address on the front end? But when you have a job description anywhere, third party or direct employer, that only has a few bullet points talking about the clinical aspects of the job, and then you got a massive community sell, unless you really just want to be in that community, that's a red flag. There should be at least a corresponding or a good amount of points there, what you're going to be doing in the actual job. If they're not, they're trying to fluff it because probably not a lot of good points in that job. An oversized sign-on bonus with a stringent clawback terminology clause within it, meaning if you get a very large sign-on bonus, there's a reason for that. This stuff isn't free. Much as we'd love to think that it is, you're getting offered something as a marketing tool. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sign-on bonuses are great. I would always push to get those on the jobs that I worked. But you want to make sure you understand if it's a large sign-on bonus, well, no matter what, you want to look into it, but especially if it's a large sign-on bonus. What's the payback terms? Generally, payback terms would be 1 to 2 years. Particularly, they should be prorated, meaning that if you take a job and you sign a contract for a year, and I'm just giving an example here, don't do this, obviously. But if you sign for a year and you only work 2/3 of the time, you pay 33% of it back rather than the whole amount. If you see it say the whole amount, be a little bit cautious there. One thing you want to do, particularly if you're a specialty practitioner, if you're a physician that works a very unique specialty, you want to make sure that the employer is doing their due diligence. Look at the area, pull the population data. Census data is free. You can pull population data. I did this anytime I worked a job. Look at all the other competition in the area. Does the population support the volume that you're being promised? If you're being promised X amount of volume as a neurologist, or maybe you're a pediatric neurologist and you come in there and there's 3 other pediatric neurologists and it's a 50,000 person community, probably not going to be a very viable long-term option for you unless there's a massive growth and families are moving in or something like that. Hospitals particularly are required to do this. They don't always do it well. Sometimes they half-heart it. Sometimes they have massive expansion plans. There's just bad leadership in place making these decisions. Don't get caught up in that. Also, roster drift. This is something that no one does and you absolutely should do. There's something known as the Wayback Machine. Go to archive.org. The Wayback Machine is you can put in a website and you can see what that site was 30, 60, 120 days ago. Go to the page with the current number of physicians, advanced practitioners, whatever you're hiring for. See who's there. Compare that with Wayback Machine. How many people are they losing? You want to get an understanding of what's the consistency here. It's great if you do that and there's almost no change and they're saying it's growth or they're replacing someone and it lines up. Well, then that's perfect. But protect yourself. If this is something you're taking very seriously, make sure that you take some time. It's much more easier than it might sound. If you've never done it, you can put it in their hospital practice, whatever it is, look at their provider page. It is the reality too, especially with some practices, they just don't update. Sometimes I've gone on a website and I'm like, oh, wow, this is 5 years ago. Do any of these people still practice here? Oh, no, they've retired. Okay, let's update this. Now, you're going to have that too. Generally, you can kind of pick up on that if you're looking in a smaller area and you come across that, but keep that in mind. Now let's look at green flags. When the employer is named, or in the case of a third-party agency, the recruiter is named directly, you can see that. Or even more so, if you see an ATS reference number, applicant tracking system. We talked before about the sad and unfortunate reality of ghost jobs. Ghost jobs are positions that certain groups or companies will put out there for various reasons. One, to try to bolster the impression of their growth and success. Another time because they're farming CVs. They want you to hit that easy apply so you can get your CV. Oh, we filled it. Or, oh, the requisition closed. There are audits to these things, and they do need to be careful doing that. So you're generally not going to see a hashtag reference number, ATS number, for a job that's not real. If you see that, that's a pretty good sign. When you see specific numbers, compensation, sign-on, relocation, CME, this is great. I would always push for this kind of transparency. When a doctor can pull up a job and see specific numbers, yeah, we can negotiate sometimes. There's usually room for that. But when they just see a bunch of vague adjectives, they're gone and they should be. You've got to give some kind of specifics. So when you see that as a physician, that is a green flag that there's someone out here that's putting a good faith effort out there to commit to this. And again, don't just necessarily, if you see something, oh, that's not it, I'm out, I need more, or you can always ask. Worst they can do is say no. If you like the job, reach out anyways. Support staff is specifically named. You have advanced practitioners, you have residents working with you, you have MAs working with you, whatever it is. When you get that specific staffing stated in there, that's a huge sign that someone is acting in good faith transparency. Realistic patient numbers, volumes, patient encounters. What's the census? Say 18 to 22 patients per day on the outpatient side, rather than just vague generics. A green flag is always specific numbers. Obviously, a stated reason why they're recruiting is amazing. You're not always going to see it, but it's great when you can. Sometimes you'll see stated physicians. If they state the other kind of doctors, you'll be working with 3 internal medicine doctors, 1 neurologist, an ENT, or whatever it is. That's great. Definitely a green flag. Malpractice coverage. If it's addressed, is it claims made or occurrence? Is there tail? How does that work? You're not always going to see that. But when you do, it's a green flag. And this is true of all benefits. Now, forcing the number, pay transparency. I've mentioned this a few times and I keep hammering this because it is very important and most people don't know. You have a lot more rights as a job seeker than most of us understand in understanding compensation. Depending on the state, you can look this up. An easy, quick Google search will find these answers for you. And make sure you do that because they change regularly. Sometimes they have to put a range. Sometimes they have to provide a range if requested. Always request a range if it's not there. If you like this job, it doesn't matter if the state transparency law permits it or not. Do it anyways. The worst they can do is say no, and you kind of know who you're working with. Generally, they're not. But if the job requires that they do it and it's not there, you don't need to be adversarial. You can just reach out, send a quick email. Say, before we move forward, can you please send me the good faith salary range for this job description? You're not beating around the bush. You're not letting them walk all over you. You're asking for something that should be there. You're not being pushy. A very fair and objective way to push that if it's not there. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes they have new HR. Sometimes they're overstaffed. Sometimes they're trying to hide something. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. As I mentioned before too, with telehealth, depending on the state that you're in, you have a lot of flexibility here. If you're working in one state that does have transparency laws, but the job itself is located in a state that doesn't, but it permits you to work from that state, you are able to operate from the parameters and laws of that state that you're from. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is only for informational and entertainment and all the other important caveats we're going to give. Make sure you talk to someone. Make sure you're doing your due diligence to confirm that all this is accurate, correct, and true. I only speak from experience. So next, what do you want to do? Reverse job search is something that I always encourage. So unless you really are just very broadly open to the Southeast, start looking specifically in where you want to be. Look at population size. You can pull census data quickly. You can go look at the cities that you want to be in. You can get an understanding, the MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area. Then you have the MSA, the Micropolitan Statistical Area. That's like, so in Atlanta, for instance, it'll say, I think 6 million people. Well, that's the MSA. That's broadly, that's way outside of Atlanta. The city itself, that's the Micropolitan Statistical Area. That's much less, much smaller. But you have this very large kind of metropolitan statistical area. But just get an idea of where you want to be. Start to reverse engine your search. Look at the hospitals. Look up the actual places that you want to be. I've talked to a lot of doctors that are getting to the end of either their graduation or their time is coming up, and they haven't even looked at anywhere they want to be. They just know 100%, I have to have this, and do this. And it's like, okay, where? I don't know. Find it for me. I can't. Great. What's not there? Is that available? Is there even a hospital in that area? Do they have a labor division? Do they have whatever it is you're looking for? So make sure that you're reverse engineering your search and looking for the specifics as well so that you have a much cleaner parameter set and framework to work from. Another thing you can do is CMS has a hospital compare option. You can go on their website and you can compare different hospitals. You can look at patient readmissions. You can look at quality ratings and look at the kind of things that are going to be important to you, particularly as a doctor, because these things are relevant. If you have a hospital that's not doing very great, doesn't have the best ratings, these tend to have more problematic cases that can lead to malpractice. Not always, but it's certainly something there. You want to understand the context and the people and the situation you're going to be working in. And also, you can use the local news. Always type in the local news. I would do this with candidates. I found out things about candidates that had nothing to do with malpractice or any kind of penalty from board certification or licensing that you wouldn't see otherwise, but horrible things, domestic violence, and some of these other charges that it's like, okay, I don't think my client's going to want to work with this person. And it comes up. If you are in the medical community, it's going to come up. Do the same for the client side. Just go into local news. Go into any AI or Google search and just type in anything to do with hospitals. You can look at the financial aspect of hospitals too, and this can be important. Look at things like upgrade, downgrade. Days cash on hand is something that you really want to know for hospitals you're going to work at, because that gives you an idea of their financial status. And you can find, it is a little complicated. You can go to Moody's and Fitch and start working through all the information there to find out the financial viability of a hospital. But if you can find out the days cash on hand, that's for any kind of emergency, worldwide pandemic, flood, earthquake, any kind of, other horrible political thing you can think of that happens. And there's this emergency situation and things need to keep running until help can come. Generally, 200 days cash on hand is good. That means that the hospital is doing pretty well. 150 days, they're starting to kind of a little nervous here. When you get 100, there's probably some concerns. And the next, find the human. What do I mean by that? Find the individual that is working this job, direct or through the agency. Go on LinkedIn. Reach out to them. Vet them, who you're working with. Get to know them. If this is the job you really want, it's going to behoove you to have an advocate, whether it's a recruiter on the retained or external side, or if it's an in-house recruiter, they do weigh in. You would always be asked, what's your opinion? What do you think? Do you like this person? And if the client trusts you, which I would always build trust with my clients, because there's times I would say, no, I've submitted candidates and then withdrew them. Say, hey, well, I've submitted it. You can obviously move forward if you want, but this just came to my attention. Remember, I was working with some radiologists and this guy was great and moved forward with them. And I got calls from a couple other radiologists I had placed years ago who they were like, hey, Bo, we heard about this. Careful with this guy. They started explaining some things that had happened. They started sending me links to some articles. And I was like, oh, wow. And I shared it with the client and I said, I'm not comfortable getting behind this person anymore. It didn't come up. I wasn't aware of this. Thankfully, some doctors that I placed and had a great relationship warned me about this. I don't think they moved forward. I don't really remember. But it's up to the client at that point. But you want to have a good relationship with your recruiter because they are going to speak favorably for you. Now, granted, most just want to get paid, but clients can usually see through that. Another thing that almost no one ever does is talk to the person leaving. You can use the Wayback Machine. Sometimes they'll tell you, feel free to ask, who was the doctor that left? You can even ask, can I speak to them? And keep in mind, there is going to be a bias there. Think about it. It's the same with negative reviews. People generally are more inclined to leave negative reviews if they've had a negative experience. Whether it's real or not, perception becomes a reality than they are for a positive experience. So be careful. You want to take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure you have colleagues that have been let go or gotten into trouble who are so sure they didn't do anything wrong. It was everyone else. That does happen sometimes. But still, do yourself the due diligence of reaching out. I would always try to do that. If we're replacing someone, one of the first questions I'd ask a client is, can I speak to the doctor that left? Would they be willing to talk with me? Sometimes like, yeah, great. They just moved away or something happened or they love this place and it was a sad loss. Those are great because then I would try to connect them with an incoming candidate and that would obviously be very beneficial for the incoming candidate as well. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes things are on bad terms. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a bad situation, but you want to be aware of it. So ultimately, protect your CV. Like we said, avoid the heavy aggregator, easy apply opportunities that really just kind of funnel your CV and you can lose control of it. Use one dedicated email address. Always create a new email address. You go to Gmail, Proton, whatever you want to do, create an email and use just that. Don't share your personal. Funnel everything through that. Save yourself the hassle that will come because even when you take a job, you're still going to be getting bombarded. Keep a submission log of where you've gone, where you've been submitted to, what you're looking for, which recruiter you're talking to. I know it's a little bit extra work. You're going to do some charting, some notes. That's okay. It's going to benefit you in the long run. Don't be adversarial. If you don't want to work with a recruiter on the agent side, don't. But you're going to work with someone and nothing good is going to come from being adversarial. You can walk away from anything. You're not required to take anything. But the better relationship you have with someone, the more you can get along with them, more honest they're going to be with you, the more you're going to learn about something. Even if you've had bad relationships with recruiters, I have, and I was a recruiter. It happens, but there's no point to that. Nothing good will come of it for you, is ultimately what I'm saying. Ask diagnostic questions early, as early as you can, not later. The base compensation floor, conversion factor, visa support if you need it, relocation, is it a reimbursement or is it an upfront cost? Get an idea of these things that are important to you so you can decide as you move forward or whether you want to move forward. Respect the channel. If you are working with a third-party agency, don't go around that. It just sucks. As a recruiter, I have worked so hard in jobs and then had someone just go around me after getting everything they want. And one, it causes legal issues because that client has an obligation to pay if we can prove it. Two, it often hurts that candidate because the client knows what happened. I've been in communication, submitted them, so that they know that they're already lying and untrustworthy. It's not going to do you any good. You want to be careful doing that. And then I'm not going to work with you again. I don't trust you. And I'm going to put notes in the system. So probably anyone else in the company will be like, oh, this person's not super reliable. Be careful with that. Respect the channel. You don't pay anything, and actually having a recruiter can sometimes be a benefit to you. Not always, but that's something that you want to decide. Also, ask hard questions, but just respectfully. Again, being adversarial. I've had some doctors come at me like we are arch rivaled enemies from childhood or something. It's like, I have to submit you to my client, and you're not really giving me any reason to want to put my name behind you. You can ask hard questions. And this is going to be harder too when you've had 7 recruiters call you in a day and most of them aren't being honest, and you can tell, and you're going to be frustrated, and you talk to another one who might be a good one. I've gotten that. So sometimes I would say, look, I think I caught you at a bad time. They're like, you just called me. Your company just called me 4 times. It's like, no, we actually were prevented from doing that in the system. The calls, we can't do that. It logs automatically. You haven't heard from us today, and you've never heard from me before. But it's hard on your side to always understand that. So I'd always say, look, I think I caught you at a bad time. I clearly understand. Can we do this again? I'd love to talk with you. Can I set up a call for you later today or tomorrow? And generally, yeah, they were just having a bad day. We all have bad days, and sometimes they're just being bombarded. As I would teach recruiters when I was a recruiting trainer, polite, be respectful. You never know what someone's going through. The same is true on the other side. So the 10 questions that you want to ask, I'm just going to rapid fire go through these when you're speaking with your recruiter, in-house or agency side. If it's agency, are you retained or contingent? When did you last speak with the client? You want to get an understanding of what the relationship with the client. Why is the position open? What is the base RVU, conversion factor, threshold? What did the median physicians earn last year? Is this obtainable? Is this something I can do? Malpractice coverage, occurrence base, claims made. Who pays tail? What is the call ratio? Is it going to change? Is there any protection so that I come in and then doctors leave and I'm not going from 1 and 4 to a 1 and 1? Restrictive covenants. Huge. We'll talk more about these in a future conversation, but you want to find out what are the restrictive covenants. If you're working at a location that's a satellite and there's 20 other satellite locations all throughout the city, does a restrictive covenant mean you can't work within a 5-10 mile radius of any of them? That's intense. That's out there sometimes. Or just the place that you were at specifically. This is more of a contractual question, to be completely honest, which is why we'll talk about it more in the contract talk that I have coming up here. How many physicians have left the group in the last 3 years? Again, you can find this out. Hopefully, they're going to tell you the truth and be honest with you. Usually they are, because this stuff does come up. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes people are hiding things. Use a Wayback Machine. Find out for yourself. What is the partnership? What is the physician leadership opportunities? If there is no partnership, what is the advancement? And the last question you want to ask is, what is the time frame on this whole process of me moving forward, getting an offer out, negotiating? I don't want to do this for 2 years. I also don't want to make a decision next week. What is your process? Give me an idea of what that looks like. And they might not know, but this is a good way to vet someone to see how they respond to this kind of stuff. One, you can see how prepared they are. A lot of times, if it's a practice that hasn't recruited before, which some of the best practices to work with, because like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but we really want a doctor in here. So how can we keep them happy and make them stay? Like, go take a seat and let me handle it. I'd love to hear that. And so I would help them out with that. Not everyone has a consultant recruiter working with them. So they may or may not have an answer, but at least you get kind of an idea of who you're working with. Physicians read a job description as an application portal. Take it as a research project. You're making a decision that affects the next 5 to 10 years, at least, of your life and of your family. You want to make sure you're doing the right thing with it. I hope that was helpful. If so, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, share. I would really appreciate it. It's very difficult to get started on YouTube these days, and I'm trying to grow as a young creator so that I can continue to help others in the medical world find the career success and practice health that they're looking for and that they deserve. With that, I will see you in the next one.